I'm gonna pull up YouTube on my phone to see if I can.
Yeah, I'm pulling it up right now. Let's
Done.
see.
Redirecting to YouTube. Oh yeah. What? All right. This is weird. I'm looking at us on my phone. All right. So I think it's
Yeah.
that's gonna
Yeah, here
create
we
an
go.
echo. All right. Um,
Hit us with the intro, man.
should I share the link quick, do you think?
Oh, yeah, that's probably a good call.
I guess do you want to do it on some?
Yeah, let me do that.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm pulling it up right now.
I imagine there's probably a way in the future to have like a waiting screen type thing while we do these types of
Cer-
things,
we
but
certainly hope so, but we roll with the punches, man.
yeah.
All right. Out on Twitter.
Shall we?
Yeah, let's do it.
Alrighty. Hello and welcome to At the 55, your home for U Sports football. Me and Tom are back on the mics and trying out something a little bit new today with the
Hmm.
live stream straight to YouTube. Because there's some pretty exciting news going on right now that just couldn't wait for its own pod. So we need to get into it, but as always, not before I say, Tom, how the heck you doing, my friend?
Normally, I say I'm doing really great here, but I
You're
think I'm
not
going to
though.
go drive my car
You're
off a
not.
cliff right now because my God, I'm not doing well. I got a painted smile on because I'm just trying to hide the tears.
Yeah. If you're tuning in, you can see the name of the episode. We're reacting to the news that star quarterback, formerly of the McMaster Marauders, Keegan Hall, is taking his talents to Steels and Finch, Kiel, wherever, to play for the York Lions, along with his brother in the passing game in Nicholas Adair.
Hmm.
Um, Tom, you still have that decal on the helmet, so you still have some level of love for your
Listen, it's no free
alumni.
GK over here, but I'm still a Mac guy, okay?
Tom, this is it's new news, but it's also old news. This has been floating around the rumor mill for some time now. Um, I gotta just hand you the mic. Like, what are your thoughts? What are your feelings? What's going on over there?
Ah, of course. So with Keegan not just being a Mac guy, but being a Burlington guy as well, although he went to the dreaded Nelson Lords for the people in Burlington, if you know, you know. I've always been a fan of him and I always want the best for him. And if this is what's best for him, then power to you. He's obviously going there for a grad program first and foremost. It's not just that he's transferring universities for 1 year of football, but I'd be lying if I say my maroon heart is broken having watched him leave and do his thing there. I mean, especially when you look at a guy and how integral he was to the offense. I mean, he was the damn offense. You start looking at numbers and you start going, oh, yeah, he threw so for X amount of yards and everything else. The one number that sticks off the page, as it did this year and last year in the years that he's been the starting quarterback, last year in 8 games, 284 passing attempts. That is an astronomical number and just showcases how much he meant to the McMaster offense and is why I am so damn nervous about the future of Mac without him.
And what's so fascinating, and it's just one of these things that teams pick up these identities where when we think about Coach Patasic, I mean, obviously your generation had arguably the best quarterback to do it in this century. in the quarter of this century that we've played through in Kyle Quinlan. You look at what Andreas Duick was able to do, leading them to that Yates Cup in 2019, and obviously a very pass heavy team. And then you get Keegan Hall, and first under Coach Patasic, where, as we talked about, maybe though it was maybe a bit much for him being the head coach and calling the plays, but also with Coach Hopkins coming in, who, especially as a guy where he's coming in from that run game mentality, former offensive lineman, and that was a point of emphasis that they'd been struggling on, young offensive line, but they still end up being this, as you read off the numbers, extremely pass heavy team. Like, you guys have obviously had great run games there. We don't need to go. We can go back into the way back machine to some of those stellar guys that you were opening up gaps for in your day there. But is it just part of the identity, the same way we look at Western football, as it's going to start with Power G and work its way out? The Guelph at its best worked its way, inside out from the run game to the passing game. Is this just part of the Mac identity, or does it just happen to be that, like, over the last 15 years, and you got to add in, of course, what Marshall did, and you'll have to correct me. Your guy came in from
Asher
Winnipeg,
Hastings.
Asher Hastings, right? So you've had stellar quarterbacks, and
Mhm.
obviously you're just going to work to the strength of the program. Like, what is it about Mac football where it seems, as not just an outsider but an outright hater, that the identity has been always rooted in the passing game? Has it just been you guys just get dudes, then you just roll with it?
Well, when you really think about it, like the run game, and of course, what as an offensive lineman, I'm going to be biased in this sense, but the run game has always been an integral part of, especially those championship winning McMaster football teams. I mean, you think about, you want to go way back when to the 2000s, you don't win all of those Yates Cups without a guy like Jesse Lumsden or Kojo Adu running the damn rock. In our day, in 2011, in that year, we had guys like Chris Pizzetta, Joey Nemeth, Wayne Moore, outstanding running backs that I had the absolute pleasure of blocking for. And even in 2019, yes, of course, you've got a guy like Andreas Duick, but you've got Justice Allen, who's right behind him as well, and kind of the everything back, doing everything you needed. And so, in that sense, that's really been the missing component of this McMaster squad here, not being able to establish that run, whether it's through whatever you want to call it. If you think it's run schemes, if you think it's the offensive line, if you think it's the running backs, whatever, certainly all of those things could come into play. Maybe it's a combination of everything, but then you also have an all Canadian type caliber at quarterback, like a Keegan Hall, where you can ask this kid to throw the ball 40, 50, 60 times a game, and he can do it and do it at a high level and get to the spot where you're playing against a Carleton team after throwing the ball 50 times or close to, and still being able to come out and find your guys in the end zone to ultimately put you over the edge and to win those tight games here. So I think Max difficulty has been being that one-dimensional team, especially on offense. But when you have this quality of quarterback that you do in Keegan Hall, of course you're going to lean on him, and especially in a guy like a Coach Patasic, who was a receiver himself, who loves the passing game. And if anything, if he is going to lean one way, he's going to lean towards the pass than more than he is the run. Leaning into your strengths this way is really where I think this McMaster identity has been. And with this, with Keegan leaving now, oh, offense, you got to find something.
Boy, do they ever, right? And man, you talk about as well in that 2019 year with the fact that Coach Grant was still there, the Coach Galloway. So again,
Mhm.
pass heavy guys to begin with. And as far as the talent, we have really only talked about Nicholas Adair in passing, the fact that he's going there. Like, not a small loss slash addition. We'll certainly
Oh,
switch to the York side of things shortly. But you just look again at like what they were able to do in a season that, again, just by all accounts was just a pretty major disappointment, and they're able to sneak into that playoff game. But again, at the end of the day, like, yes, you make the playoffs, and we were there at Mac when they took out York to make it. And you could see like true, genuine jubilance. They accomplished that goal, put aside whatever other turbulence from the year. They did it. They go down to Western, they get their lunch, taken from them, whatever. But all those things, all that efficiency, all the numbers, and we can go through the numbers of what Keegan did this year. When the fact that it's been that one trick pony, and defenses can go into games being like, okay, literally do anything else, and like we'll let you beat us. the fact that you also have guys in this passing game, you talk about Nicholas Adair, but a guy in James Priestner who finally made his way back after
Mhm.
being so banged up for time. Everett Reed also like a deadly weapon in the return game. Jackson Taylor with the outstanding first year, and then Jackson Cooling, where like so, and you go back to that. We can do the same thing with that 2019 roster that Dewick had, like talent that he was moving the ball out to, and no different for this team offensively when you look at the weapons. And frankly, I'm really excited to talk about the weapons that York's going to be able to put around this guy
Mhm.
because it's pretty stellar as well. Like again, this was a Mac passing attack where it's like if you just look at the talent on that roster, you look at it as a young offensive line that struggled a bit even prior to this current iteration, and you say, okay, shoot, let's just do what we do best. And that Western game, at the end of the day, the homecoming game, the Evan Hillock homecoming game, ugly though it went, you look at that first drive, and before it capitalized in a pick six by whomever that was in the linebacking core for Western, Mac was marching the ball and doing it through the air. And it's like, man, you like again, the numbers back it up. This guy was it's amazing. Like the numbers are just out of this world when all the chips are against him. Yes, the talent's there, the coaching minds, but the fact that teams could tee off on him, and you go through the sack numbers, some of these teams, I mean, what my Guelph Griffins, your Guelph Griffins, everybody's Guelph Griffins did to this kid was, arguably an offense in most provinces, right? So like I don't know, man, like the talent is absolutely stellar and worth noting. Though I think there's a bit more that obviously just for folks who might not clue in, right? When these decisions happen, it's not like a disgruntled player just being like,
Mhm.
"I'm out of here. I'm entering the transfer portal." This is a situation where it seems to be, and you know more of the insider track than I, of like as we see happen, a guy pursuing a master's program in this case
Mhm.
at York. But again, leaving so much talent there on the offense, even if it wasn't always clicking.
Absolutely. And once again, you talk about that, and it's not like this was a team that surprised you going into this year because we saw a very similar passing attack in 2023, and that's really what their bread and butter was on offense to lean on Keegan. And so you go into 2024 and have to assume, okay, it's going to be a lot of that, or even if it's not, let's just go into this and think that his final stats on the year, 70% completion, 2,529 passing yards, 10 touchdowns, and only 6 interceptions. When you think about 284 attempts and only 6 times you were picked off in that sense, that really helps, for me at least, put things into perspective here. I mean, this was a very special talent that McMaster was able to grab here. And along with, people forget because we didn't really see it as much last year because he was injured, but Nick Adair, that connection that him and Keegan have is a special thing, and to see that going forward. And I think the thing that really makes me nervous as a McMaster fan and as an alum is not just the presence of what the team is going to look like necessarily, but in that we saw Keegan bring the best out of his players, certainly his receivers. You're throwing balls to a guy, a first year kid in Jackson Taylor, I believe an 18-year-old, who in his own right played phenomenal football. And I don't want to take anything away from the young man. He's a special talent as well. But when you see the ball placement of some of those balls and where Jackson Taylor is able to come down with it, that makes him a better receiver because you're relying on his outstanding athletic ability to go up, and maybe it's a twisting grab or maybe it's a back shoulder throw, and he's able to make that. With a standard quarterback, you're not always getting that same opportunity. And so you have to rely a lot more on the receivers. Now, I absolutely think that Mac has some solid receivers, and I think that they can bail him out in certain areas. But when you have that quarterback with the ability to pinpoint balls where they're going a lot of the time, that elevates the level of play across the board here. And so losing that, if you lose that elevated level of play as well, that spells a whole other mystery here. And I mean, listen, we've danced around it a little bit here. A couple years ago, we may or may not have called the McMaster offensive line a bunch of cardboard cutouts in that setting, and maybe that was a little harsh. But once again, you start talking about how often Keegan's getting hit, how often he's been getting sacked, and how much he's having to deal with that. And albeit that's not just on the offensive line, I don't want to just crap on the O line, but that goes back to hey, we don't respect the fact that you guys are going to run the ball. We're going to pin our ears back and see how many times we can hit your all-star quarterback because there goes your offense if he goes down. So lots of avenues in there. As a Mac fan, once again, none of them really good. And I am very nervous about what that year is going to look like. And I'd love to hear your final thoughts, but in being positive people you and I are, let's start looking at York a little bit.
No, definitely. I guess my final thoughts from the Max standpoint, you went through the numbers on the year, and again, it's a 4-4 season, and you open up with the loss against Laurier. You then go to Richardson Stadium and you lose 27 to 22, tight ball game, but one in which Max putting up points late. And I mean, that's one of the great things with Canadian football. It can happen. So I'm not just going to chalk that up to garbage time. There is no such thing as really garbage time, especially when it was only about a two and a half score lead for them. The Guelph game, the at the 55 Bowl, we're making our way down field level, being like, the Hayes in the barn, let's go celebrate with the boys and everything like that. And all of a sudden, Keegan's connecting with, I forget who it was, for a touchdown late in the game. They get the opportunity on the onside kick. Like that was a game where, again, we're with a bunch of the Guelph guys, the non-dressers, like waiting to go on the field, being like, no, this isn't about to happen, right? So like a legit opportunity there, so you can spin it and say, man, you know what? Against two of the top teams, you almost picked up wins, and maybe you go six and maybe yeah, you end up being 6-2, and you host a playoff game. But then to transition into the York of it all, because again, that was a pretty good team last year. You narrowly escape with your playoff lives on the line, a
Mhm.
home game against the York Lions. And again, great year for them. And with them getting Keegan, York, obviously, we'll switch to that. To narrowly escape that game, and you narrowly escaped against Waterloo as well. So it's all well. And again, it's kind of the perfect maddening nature of this team. I can only imagine. Well, I shouldn't say imagine because I've gotten a good understanding from working with you so closely during this time. Like it's the fact that you can be in tight ball games with Queens and Guelph and it's in the same year and have to pull out a game in overtime and then a barn burner against York in your final two games of the season just to make the darn playoffs. I imagine it's those things when you have a generational talent at quarterback, great receiver talent around him. You had Scott Brady dialing up that defense with some absolute dogs in there, and it's like, what the hell is going on, right?
Folks, for the people who listen to our McMaster podcast, or maybe a little bit the day before the podcast before, you might have heard Zach say how lucky I was because we had a guest joining us here. This is exactly why, because he's been waiting to just fire shots off the bow at McMaster because he's right. He's right. We went. I say we. McMaster went 4-4, and three out of those four wins were nail biting wins.
It's tough, right? But again, and I think there's a chance we might get the man of the hour, the man of the day, the man of the year, as it's shaping up in the early throes of the off season period here. In Keegan to join us, not official in that manner yet, but hoping that we can maybe get him on to talk about kind of what this progress is going. But let's look at the team and the setting of the team he's making his move to in the York Lions. And I mean, off the jump, and you know, first attempt here with the live stream. So we got a few people tuning in. Don't know who's all tuning in. If I'm gonna make a bet as far as some of our consistent fans tuning in, Sanjeev Lal. If you're
Oh,
tuning in, my goodness, like once again, justice for our boy in Sean Lal. Cause hey, I love what that guy can do. I think he was highly underrated by not only fans, but coaches that he's played for. He's not Keegan Hall. Having said that, the weapons that Sean got to play with for part of last year, because again, they went back and forth a little bit on the quarterback side, but that Keegan will be inheriting include the likes of, and it's, again, from where we sit here mid-March, hard to say exactly, but they, for starters, CJ Vincent, who was a name that we saw appear on the national invitational list for the combine, that both of us were like, wait a second, who's this guy? Right? He transferred in from West Shore, didn't play last year. Got to see him at the combine. Yeah, guy is a dude. Dude is a guy. Man's a weapon. Throwing the ball, he'll go bring it down for you. So if he comes back next year, that's outstanding. We're obviously pretty certain Alfred Olay, as we talked about on the pod, he's probably done there. Would I be stoked to see him return? Absolutely.
Oh yeah.
Avery Ford, the 6'4", Megatron that we got up here transferring in from the US,
Hmm.
absolutely has me excited. Cairo Berry, that just had us out of our seats week 1 when they were hosting Ottawa, what he could do in the return game, and then the possibility if they can return Avante McCoy as that everything Swiss Army knife of a back. Again, we were making the comparison talking about Ottawa, about the Charles Asselin, Liam Talbot types, and I think you put him in that mix as well. And then you add in some of the running backs like Malcolm Alunga, and when you can hand it off to Avante as well, that is a very nice array of weapons to
Oh
be able to put Keegan into.
my God, just the thing that I just obviously you're thinking about it, but you put two and two together, and I love that we got it on my reaction live here. Zach, we get to watch if everything works out. We don't know 100% if he's coming back or not. We get to watch Keegan Hall to Avante McCoy. Are
Yeah,
you
baby.
kidding me, man? Like we've seen what these guys can do, the generational talent when haven't always had the most consistent quarterbacks throwing to him. To have a dude like Keegan Hall be able to air the ball out and say, like, Avante, go run as fast as you can. I promise you, I can still get it in your range. That's going to be so unbelievable. And you start to see this York team, especially near the end of it, which, well, once again, Sean Lall, outstanding. We still very much believe in you. We're huge fans of you, but you saw near the end of it what happened to this offense when they started to stretch defenses vertically. And you start seeing things start to open up in that. And if you get Keegan Hall, who's consistently going to be doing that, handing the ball off to Melk Salunga, saying, hey, you're going to have a couple of linebackers who are going to be sitting at 5'10" or maybe even 15 yards, go rip off a couple yards here. That's what I'm really interested in seeing. And even going back to what we were saying previously, I know that there's a young man who's in the national combine right now or going to that as a defensive lineman. But does Brandon Davies
Brandon
Lyons
Davis
comes back
Lyons.
as an offensive lineman here to help
Oh,
protect the
buddy.
boy as well. Woo-hoo-hoo-hoo. That's a lot of excitement for York fans here going into this season.
It really is. And obviously, I mean, first and foremost, I mean, hey, I can at least think of one team in the Hamilton region that keeps a quarterback. So, Sean, if you feel like switching colors again, man, I think Matt can
Oh
take you right
God.
now. We're obviously, as far as I'm aware, because I am not tuned into the online sphere where all the news happens, but as far as I know, they're still in the search for the successor to Rick Walters at the offensive coordinator position. I mean, there's all the news of with Tommy Dennison. It seems like that's somewhat up in the air of just what his role is going to be. Didn't seem too dissimilar from his time at U of T, where I mean, and he was with
Mhm.
York like not too long ago. So it's a weird development. So like as this whole story unfolds, hopefully that gives us some more insight. I mean, I was pretty excited at the prospect of seeing Sean Law in a Tommy Dennison offense with some of these weapons where like you have the right type of guy with an OC who wants to send, 3, 4 guys deep and just, try and put a defense into conflict in that nature. I mean, Keegan can make those throws, right? And you talk about seeing him do Avante, I was lucky enough to see that matchup at the Invitational a couple weeks ago. And if there were any questions about it, if you didn't get to see any of the reps or anything like that, Keegan was the best quarterback there, like bar none. And that's with Tuchinski there. That's with Evan Hillock there. Like he was the best quarterback that was there, bar none. So still got to figure out that offensive coordinator piece. But when we talked about York, we kind of had this conversation around the notion of when you look at the pieces who are there, you think about at the time Sean Lawler. When we were recording, we were also thinking that it could likely be Keegan.
Mhm.
When you put Keegan into the mix, let's have that conversation again. You put Keegan into the mix now as QB1. You add a Nicholas Adair to those other weapons that they had. I think I have heard that Jared Hardesty might not be back for them this year.
Mhm.
Haven't confirmed that. Don't know his full status. But you think about some of those weapons, and you just say, hey, Avante's coming back. You say CJ Vincent will play a year of football for them. So you add in like just another big like weapon for them at receiver. What kind of stuff do you want to see? If Coach Janke gives you the call, we get off the phone right now. He says, Tom, I want you to dial up this offense. Keegan, these guys, offensive line play. What are some of the things with these weapons that you'd want to be able to do now with Keegan in the mix?
I think with Keegan Hall, you get such an incredible asset here because once again, like we talked about it, you've got a quarterback now who not only can, but is used to throwing the ball 40, 50, 60 times in a game here, who can take the game over if you need him to. I think the best thing that you start doing is that when he's at Mac, and certainly I think this is something you and I are talking about, he's throwing the ball to throw the ball, and he's throwing the ball to, obviously gain yards, whatever. Here, I would love to see him throw the ball to set up the run and to really see about opening up areas and spreading that defense out, making sure that defensive box is nice and light so that you've got your outstanding running backs who can really make their thing and do their thing there. That's really what I would love to see here. So not necessarily just rinse and repeat the same formula that you did at McMaster. I think the whole reason or big reason of this change here is to see a change in that offense and to see a little bit more, you know, aspects of that. So here, love to see, like, here's a quick slant route to Avante McCoy. Get him the ball in space because special things will happen regardless of who's throwing the ball to him. Have him take the lid off and throw the ball down the field for sure, but then make sure that you're still as really going after the run game and sticking to the run game and not just saying, okay, first quarter we weren't really able to get a whole lot done on the ground, so we're just going to give that up and immediately go to the pass. I think that you should still certainly lean on Keegan more than the run game. That has to be another aspect to it because once again, we started talking about the great success that I had at Mac, that you had at Guelph, that Western has every damn year, it seems like. It's great quarterback play with a fantastic, reliable run game. And that's what I think needs to come out of this. I think you need to be able to set up the pass, but you need to be able to run the football to really be consistent there. Because like you and I are saying, there were times in this past year and even 2 years ago where Mac has the lead, but because they don't have a consistent run game and they're not able to run out the clock, it's two passes here and there, maybe it's a two and out, and then the ball gets back to the defense with like 10 seconds being run off. So having that and getting that other area, it's you just have to, and that's the critical part of this.
Well, I totally agree. And you mentioned the prospect of Brandon Davies Lions and what his status is going to be. And that's a huge question mark for them that could, swing either way if he comes back and if he's going to be on the O line or on the D line. They have a couple other veteran O linemen who are in that fringe kind of territory of if they come back, then again, it's a really nice veteran O line they have. If they're gone, then again, that's a big void to fill. And as is, it's nice having veterans back who have that chemistry, but we're not talking about a top tier O line to begin with. So you're kind of hoping you get that back to start with because when you go by the numbers, I just had it up in front of me. I think I'm gonna have to go slightly off of memory. Matt Lynn in his 7 games played, but not 7 full games, was sacked 12 times. Sean Law 17 times. So obviously that you're hoping that they make the step forward and he can obviously help out the offensive line play from that perspective because not only like this is the thing about Keegan's game is that like he obviously has as good an arm as anyone in the country, but he ends up where to have it. He ends up rushing the ball like a good number of times as well, mostly out of necessity. Picks up 200 yards on the ground on 40 attempts, averages 25 yards a game. Like that's nice. Like that's nicer than a lot of like second down or second down running backs or second string running backs. And again, a lot of that's out of necessity, but like he is like if you've never met Keegan in person, like the thing that jumps off the page, we just came off talking a little Ottawa GG's football. That pod's coming out tomorrow. If you're tuning in live to this one, again, new with the live stream. Thanks for tuning in. Appreciate you always following. Talked about a guy in Josh Jansen, the stature of that guy. Keegan, same type of build where it's like, whoa, okay, this is a big dude. You shake his hand, you're like, holy cow, your hand can probably wrap all the way around that football. But sneaky athletic too, where he's keeping plays alive while maintaining this ability to keep his eyes downfield. And then we
Mhm.
talked about this in a couple of the games. I think it was coming off of that Western game, drubbing though it may have been, where you're in a pinch where you almost think you look at a guy like Keegan and maybe you think to yourself, he's that conventional statuesque pocket passer. Hey, just, rush him, get to the quarterback, don't worry too much about any contained principles or anything like that. and just sink that pocket, and good things will happen. And then you see him make plays with his feet, and you see the way that he's able to keep his eyes downfield, and you think to yourself, well, okay, maybe letting him break the pocket, because as we talked about with again, just coming off the back talking about Ottawa, even when you have a great secondary, at a certain point, if you're not getting home to the quarterback in time, good QBs are going to find a way to make you pay for it downfield. So I say all that in saying that I think there's some creative ways that this York offense can, again, if Davies Lyons is back, if some of those other vets are back, you already have a solid but not great O line.
Hmm.
Maybe it'll move from solid to good, what have you. But I think there's some ways that you can take advantage of the depth of talent he has at skill position to maybe go with a few more tight end sets, jumbo sets of some kind, have him moving on the run because we know he can throw it. Like if he's a 10 out of 10 in a clean pocket or whatever, he's maybe an 8 out of 10 when he's having to move on the run, and he's still better than most by all accounts if it's a broken play of something of that kind, which again, I think just creates so many more just variables on that offense and ways for them to just create headaches for defensive coordinators all across the land.
Uh-huh.
Um, Tom,
Yep.
we're about half hour into this. What else are you thinking right now? I got a few other questions I want to throw your way, but what other thoughts as we react to the news of the day?
So one of the things that I wanted to bring up, and I appreciate that we have watchers watching us live. We had a comment that was here as well from one Mr. Kyle Cushman, and he brings it up in something that I wanted to say as well. York's defense played so well, especially in the first half. Excited to see how Hall helps the offense and takes advantage of that. So once again, you start talking about what is this going to mean, not just for the offense, but for the defense, and not just any defense, but a Greg Knox defense. And you start thinking about, hey, maybe you're a little bit apprehensive to take a lot of shots or to blitz a lot of dudes or to do whatever else on the defensive side because you have to make sure that you're keeping guys off the board. Whereas now, if you really want to get the mad scientist Foxy Noxy really going here, and you say, yeah, you know what? Send your +7 pressure. Send your extra guy that you want to. Even if you get torched, you've got an offense here that can now score and can score at will if everything works out to what we think is going to work out to. So there's a lot of avenues here from the defensive side of the ball that's really going to work out. And I see you smiling. Did you see who else commented on this?
I did. Hi, Brandon Davies Lyons. Nice to see you, my friend. Sorry, I got distracted there, rightfully so. I love the take though. Please continue.
Yeah. So once again, you start thinking about, listen, we have an outstanding, and I, bring this back to my own McMaster days because not only is there a McMaster quarterback, but our defensive coordinator through all of those wins in 2011, 2012, and 2014 was Greg Knox. And especially in 2011 and 2012, where we have an outstanding offensive showcase with Kyle Quinlan, like you said, arguably the best quarterback of this past century here, you can start to see where that defense starts coming into play. You get guys like, oh my God, you've got Nick Shorthill, who's coming off the edge. Back in 2011, you've got a President's Award winner in Ryan Chmielewski. In 2012, you got a President's Award winner in Ram Show who are doing their things. Massive guys on the defensive line, and they're really able to go out all day long and not have to worry about anything because they've got fantastic running or fantastic offense that's there. So we're really interested to see what happens with this defense. And Brandon Davies Lyons comments, just got home from the UB Pro Day. Long, amazing day. We love that for you so much. But like we just mentioned here, you might have missed it. There's a certain dude named Keegan Hall coming to your university now that if you do come back to York, might be asking, hey, man, could really love to see you on the offensive line if you're really hoping to.
No, absolutely, man. And you know what? Honestly, like I think just as a few final thoughts, and actually, what? Speaking of comments, maybe I can prompt you because you put something out on our social media. Some interesting feedback we got from people. We can keep it anonymous, perhaps, but just as far as putting it out into the universe, as far as how other people are reacting to this. And again, we don't know what the schedule is yet. There's so many changes that are going to happen between now and late August when we kick off this season, but it's trying to get a sense of where people think this team's going to be, because we had the conversation as we're having in all our exit meeting episodes that we're doing of from where we sit right now, what's kind of the neighborhood, what's the tier that you put these teams in? And I think we had York pretty comfortably in saying like, U of T, Waterloo, Mac, make yourself the best of that group, and like, maybe you steal a win from someone like on that next gap above, and then you make the playoffs, kind of like they did this year. I think we have to do a reassessment of that from where we stand right now, because like, again, we had an idea of this happening, but this completely changed it. So kind of two things that I'm throwing at you. Number one, some of the feedback that we're getting, and Brandon, I am doing outstanding, and my friend Tom's doing a little bit less because of course him as the Matt guy in the house taking a bit of a shot today. Again, if you're just tuned in, the name says it all. Keegan Hall has taken his talents to the York Fighting Lions along with his partner in crime in that receiving core in Nicholas Adair from Mac. But yeah, what's some of the reaction online, Tom? And are we adjusting now sort of the tier that this team is sitting in from where we sit right now on March 13th?
So yes, there is a lot of talk on online with our Instagram here. And for the folks who really love drama, I'm sure you would just love to know who is talking all kinds of smack here, because there's a lot of people who are in that mid-tier level saying 3-5, 4-4, 5-3. There's a few folks who may or may not be wearing a double shade of blue who are saying 0-8 next season. And there may or may not have been somebody wearing maroon that might have said the same thing. So maybe there's guys who are feeling a little miffed at the whole news of everything that's happening here, which I eat up because I love to see it. You love to see everything here. But when you ask me about resetting and about seeing where this team goes, I think already when you were looking at them this past season, they were in that almost mid tier. Obviously, they finished at 2-6, which is in that lower tier of the OUA, but a couple of games here or there that were very close. We start looking at that Ottawa game that we actually just talked about on the Ottawa podcast that's going to be coming out in a little while. And that game is like 7-4 for the longest time because nobody can get a lot of things going. But also, Ottawa's not able to get anything going because of how well that defense is playing. So if that defense is not playing as well as they are, and that offense can really start producing, that starts, you've got a whole other avenue here. So I do think that this team deserves to be in an upper echelon, or a higher echelon that I should say in this OUA tier. I think it's not unrealistic to say that the York team is going to finish 5-3 this season, and not just win against those three other bottom tier teams, but to steal a couple of games from a top level or even mid-level team here. I think that with all of the players that are in there, with the outstanding receivers and weapons that Keegan will have, and with the mad scientist in Coach Greg Knox having another year under his belt, I really think that this team is going to overachieve and they're going to do some really special things going into next year.
I'm in total alignment. And the one thing that I'll be interested to see with this team, and just quickly, and we joked about it on the Ottawa pod that's coming out shortly, that again, shout out to our guy and Coach Grandy for joining us to talk McMaster last week. It certainly tempered, pardon me, some of my takes, though I haven't been shy on passing those around like Halloween candy. So to the remark from the anonymous marauder in the chat saying York's gonna, go 0-8. May I say that the only universe that exists in is if you aren't on their schedule, because you barely beat them with Keegan on your team, okay? So let's just pump the brakes over there. I know you don't speak for the whole club. I got love for people in
Wow.
that program, but let's just pump the brakes over there right now if we're keeping it real and looking at the talent on these teams. The one thing that's gonna be so interesting to see is I love how Coach Janke reset the culture.
Mhm.
Earn your stripes. Decals are coming off. And what a great year it was for this team. And taking Mac down to the wire in that final game of the regular season, playoffs on the line. And I don't think anyone who is being honest about where this team has been could say in their heart of hearts that they dropped the ball. They gave themselves a shot. And frankly, they didn't have to play Western in the regular season. Like, save yourself the trip. I know it sounds like outside of just like how we talk about sport and like no always play for that other game. And yeah, it's great and you can have that taste of playoffs and whatever. I don't know, did it do Waterloo all that good to get 60 dropped on them by Laurier a year prior in the first round? I lean towards no. Put all that aside, York was in a position going into this year prior to this news happening being official where, okay, hey, York, we expect you to make the playoffs now. Like, be the best of that bottom tier and be in a position to steal a game. Like, essentially, do what you did this year, but get it done now. Make the playoffs and lose that first round game. This, in doing what you just did there, resetting the calculus. It'll be interesting to see how this team, a team that hasn't been in the playoffs since I don't remember when. It's been a few moons. And
Hmm.
with now arguably, and we should go through it more officially, like before Keegan's thrown a ball for the York Lions, is he the best quarterback to play for this team? Like I think about a guy in Brett Hunchak from, a little under 10 years ago who was a terrific ball player and with his brother and Colton Hunchak and Luther Kunavua and some of the other great players they had on that team. Keegan might already have. So you have the name like Greg Knox running that defense. And, you mentioned some of those guys from your era of MAC football playing under Knox. How do the names Peyton Ryder, Brody Clark sound for you as far as the guys that you're now saying, go to town, fellas, have some fun out there, and our offense will pick you up if we catch a bad play here or there. How this team reacts now to actually be in a position where to quote something Stu Lang told to me once, you can only ever be unsung once. You can't be unsung. Once
Hmm.
people have caught on, it's
Hmm.
you lose that mystique. And so in some ways, York's gone from a team that could have. We went into last year saying, in theory, you could not win a whole game, and depending on how those games break down, we could still be like, we like how things are going. Winning isn't everything right now. Reset the culture and traject into a positive movement as Janky continues to build the culture. I'm interested to see what impact that has as they go into year 2 of the Dexter Janky era, bringing in one of the best quarterbacks in the whole country. I want to know your take on that.
I mean, yeah, you know, uh, sorry, I should word myself actually correctly here. When you start coming out this saying, is he the best quarterback that York has seen in the last 20 years? I don't think that's a hot take. I think that's absolutely accurate. If he plays like he has played in the past 2 seasons, I think that he is on pace to be a complete generational talent at the York Lions. And let's not forget, you and I have done deep dives. York has not gone above 500, and I think over 20 or 25 years. To have this as a very serious possibility to get into that upper tier of the OUA, just 2 years removed from York losing 60 plus points per game, I think that goes to the unbelievable job that Coach Yankee has done to the dogs, as our guy in Davies Lions has just said, and Brody Clark and Peyton Ryder. Like, when you've got those guys and the rest of that defense saying, we can pin our ears back and really go after here and play a little reckless because we have confidence in our offense, my God, does that add an extra layer of threat to opposing offenses here when you go into that. So I'm really excited to see the growth and the evolution of York. Like there's a real possibility that we not just see York in a playoff game, but hosting a playoff game for the first time in years and years and years. And if that doesn't get you excited as a football fan to see where this team is potentially going to go just 2 years removed from a season from hell, that's really what I'm the most excited about. The entirety of the OUA really coming together and getting better and better as things go. So I cannot wait to see what happens to these York Lions this year.
We've said it a few times now, but depending on how things shake out with players returning from various opportunities at the next level of football, this could be an absolute bananas year of OUA football that we have coming up for us, and York elevating into that territory now. with some expectations on their shoulders, is no small part of that. And I think it's an amazing time to be an OUA football fan. Shout out to all the York Lions football fans. Hey, you did it, fellas. You did it, folks. Who you've been clamoring for these moments to now have some of these meaningful games. And we saw what Lions Stadium was like at some of those home games with the fans, how they were coming out. We were very, I think, in favor of the fact that they were selling alcohol in the stands. And though, of
Mm-hmm.
course, you have to make sure you're mitigating the negative things that come with that, I think it helps build that. It's a good thing for that atmosphere. I know with there's gonna be some good week one games. We've heard a few whisperings of what those might sound like, though the schedule's not out. But I'll be darned if we're not in the house for Keegan's first start
Uh-huh.
for the York Lions. Maybe we'll just, if they're on the road, maybe we'll have to make an effort to go out and see them, because this is going to be incredible. This is going to be so special. And again, that OC position, we'll see what happens with Coach Dennison, if it is him coming in, if he's in a more consultatory position, or what have you. Who knows? Still to be determined. And yeah, maybe we'll have a more proper conversation on this, with maybe getting some more information as time passes. But Tom, final thoughts just on this reaction pod, reaction whatever this is, to the news that has been in the works for a while now, has now seemingly become official.
Yeah, to be perfectly honest here, when I was first told about this potential, I want to say a month ago, month and a half ago, it has been a while. My first reaction was, "No, God, please no." But obviously, like I mentioned previously here, I want Keegan Hall to succeed. I want that man to get the laurels that he so rightly deserves, because he is a generational talent and just so happens to be in the same kind of talent pool as a guy like a Taylor Elgersma, as a guy like an Evan Hillock, as all of these other dudes here who have seen so much success, whether personally or with a team. I want to see this dude really get his laurels and get his flowers, because he absolutely deserves it. He's a fantastic young man. He is an even better football player, and I'm really excited for him and for the York Lions in general here. When I'm talking about my McMaster Marauders, and they are just my McMaster Marauders because they're not yours, they're not anybody else's, they're just mine. I'm very interested to see what happens to this offense here, because as you and I both know, obviously Adam Grandy is a phenomenal coach, phenomenal person as well. And afterwards, he was talking to us saying, we got to be able to run the ball as well. We have to be able to make sure that we are not just a one-dimensional offense. And if anything else, this pushes you into that you cannot be one-dimensional anymore. You have to establish that. So what does this mean for the Marauders? Is this Luke Thaler? Is this Barisi and the young Barisi coming up? Is this his time to really get things going here and to see what happens? We will have to obviously wait and see, but very, very happy, very excited about Keegan and about this York Lions squad, because guys like Brandon Davies Lions, Avante McCoy, Malchus Alungas, they have been through the absolute hell that some of those seasons have been. And they've come out on the other side of that even stronger, even better as both players and human beings. And I want to see them at your very best, doing everything that you can to get into those playoffs, to host a damn playoff game, and to make a very serious run of potentially a Yates Cup. Let's see it, York. Let's see what you can do now, because you've got a generational talent at quarterback.
Amen. And you know what? We'll see where it goes, because at the end of the day, too, if it's only the 1 year rental in theory, depending on what his eligibility is, how do you then make that work in the grand scheme of, preventing it from being a one big year, exciting year, and then
Mm-hmm.
maybe you're back down? And so again, it falls on to Coach Janke's shoulders. I have all the faith in the world that he can make it happen. He can put the pieces in the right place for that team to have success, not just in this year, but in the future to come. And very excited for the state of that team, and for, as we said, the whole OUA, because the league, the U Sports League, is better when Toronto football is better. So I think we will wrap it on that. Again, our inaugural attempt at doing a little YouTube live If you liked it, if you hated it, anything in between, let us know your feedback. If you want to see more content like this when these types of stories come out and it's just quicker than trying to do a whole pod and then getting that out, let us know your feedback. Always receptive to it. Tune in on the podcast front and on the YouTube video front for our Ottawa exit meeting that is coming out. The time of talking right now will come out tomorrow on March 14th. Shout out to all the guys that were at the University of Buffalo for the, I guess, like U Sport Pro Day that was happening, including our guy Brandon Davies Lyons, including Taylor Elgazma and a couple other guys whose names I don't know off the top of my head. Shout out to those folks and everyone else getting ready for the National Combine coming up. On the podcasting front, from our side of things, next week we'll be doing a little exit meeting for the Queen's Golden Gales. So unless any other exciting news breaks out between now and then, that's when you'll be hearing us talk next. So tune in to